And we're live back on the Moneyline Monaco podcast. Alex Monaco joining you. What a week 3 in the NFL. We have to debrief about it from a betting perspective because there was so much to take away that if you're joining me and you were in action yesterday, today being Monday, right before Ravens host the Lions, it was one of the most rare, most fascinating red zone, let alone witching hours I remember in quite some time, arguably years plural. I mean, just take it from a bird's eye view before we dive into the betting numbers. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. Moneyline Monaco off a 2-1 against the spread Sunday. And I'm very upset by it, considering the push was the Broncos, and one of my two L's was not getting the best number on the Niners, although we had the Niners over the Cardinals. And look, timing of your purchases is very important. I'll talk to guys. One of a friend of mine in the industry, Bill Krakenberger, make sure to give him a follow. Crack Wins does incredible work in the industry, going on 3+ decades in the game. He says sides are some of the most difficult beat week to week outings in the NFL you can try to attack. You look at Niners closing at 1.5, they win by 1. You're looking at the Broncos plus 2.5, maybe plus 3, pending when you purchased, if you were on a side in that game. I mean, it's down to a half a point. Even think Eagles Rams 3.5 point line. You're safe. You're not. So shout out Action Network. My guy Evan Abrams over there, just one of the best in the game, in the weeds on research. And just to kind of paint a lens on what really came crashing down week 3 from a betting POV, teams up in the fourth. So teams with the lead entering the fourth quarter, 30-14 against the spread. That's a 68% clip over the full game line. And it's the worst mark through 3 weeks in the wild card era ever. So you're entering the fourth quarter with the lead. And those teams only end up covering 30 out of 44 instances, 8-5 against the spread in week 3 per Action Network. So you look at favorites of 4 or more entering the slate for this weekend being 13-0, and then you go even a little bit further with teams up and then not covering. You are trying to almost thread the needle from a straight up versus against the spread perspective from a betting lens. Now, all that to say, I think right now through 3 weeks, and we're going to point out with examples, plural, what we're seeing on the live betting board, which is over half the market if you go do your due diligence, is riveting. There is value across the National Football League from a live betting perspective, almost 2, 3, 4x than the pre-flop. I mean, a couple of examples off the noggin from yesterday. Rams are up 19 points. You could have gotten the Eagles at 14.5 and the Eagles at 10-1 on the money line. And your boy Moneyline Monaco absolutely double Costanza dipped on that one. How you doing? But in addition, you also are watching with your own eyes. You know who Philly is, losing one time in the last 15+ games. You know what I gave you on the Moneyline Monaco pod with Jalen Hurts as a home favorite, Sirianni and the boys at home. 14.5. Eagles plus 14.5, down 19 at their place. You don't think that's a gut check performance? Now, you could easily make the case Stafford goes into sicko mode. You're got like your boys at the Atlanta Falcons over there who threw a beer pong, throwing at the beer pong under the table, sit a whole round type performance against the Panthers. Then you're in trouble. You go chase the carrot on a bad New Orleans Saints team with Rattler and Kellen Moore in Seattle going down early because of special teams, etc. Next thing you know, you're chasing, and they got all the way up to over 30.5 on the live betting board. Even the Cowboys, you're watching that game, you're going, all right, maybe, but then CeeDee Lamb goes out with an ankle. You're seeing plus 9.5 on the live betting board. It may have piqued your interest, but if you're watching the game, you're going, all right, this could be just one of those Chicago bounce back overall performances and they win by 3 scores. But between Philly with the 14.5, even the New York Jets, which I saw and how do you do, took a little chance, got up to 12.5 late in the fourth quarter. Then guess what happens? The Bucks become a pick 'em, a little bit of juice around minus 120, which is a lot of juice if you're a big better, but became a pick 'em when they go down 1 point on a Baker Mayfield bada bada bing live betting spot. So now you're officially, if you want to get greedy, eating twice on a live betting beautiful timing purchase of a Jets plus 12.5, knowing that Baker may go down the field at his place and do what he does at Raymond James. And he did just that. So you could have back end 2 hits on an unbelievable foresight if you were watching it. Now, red zone's on. You're not always watching games and game flow, and football's just so one of one and funky. It's really hard to even compartmentalize some of what happened in week 3, considering that you even had a Rams team that, I mean, I guarantee they had to be over 99% an opportunity to absolutely cash a ticket at plus 3.5. Only that Jordan Davis to the crib instance debunks that. But this is just rare air, people, where if, again, reminding you, stat of the day, Action Network, Evan Abrams, teams up in the fourth, entering the fourth with the lead, covering 30 and 14. If over the full game line, they were already in that spot. It's just a fascinating takeaway because almost 5, 6, even 7 games flipped on the live betting board in a way where it's hard to even take so much inventory so quickly, especially with 9 morning games. But I mean, even another one, just shouting that out with the Eagles scenario. Teams up at 3.5 or more getting points, up by 19 or more, 185-5 against the spread. So you do want to make a mental note of what the live betting board gives you. Philly wasn't supposed to win that game outright. No shot, but plus 14.5, you have bankroll and you're watching. Come on. Those are just things that if you are betting live, you can live with. Philly at home getting 2 touchdowns. Now, if you're chasing Penix, who hasn't won a game, I saw that hilarious graphic, young career, but if his team, I believe it was 7 points was the barometer, he's winless. If he has a defense on his team that can't hold opponents to under that number, it's just, I mean, an anomaly how you can watch an Atlanta team beat a Minnesota team and then just go so flat in Carolina. And then that same Minnesota team beats the brakes off of what you're obviously seeing a fascinating no McCarthy, Carson Wentz situation in a backup dance that you don't want to take too much away, but you just got to know Minnesota can win games in more ways than one. And that's with a 5 backup quarterback scenario in week 3. You saw things can get funky. Mac Jones throws an interception, almost cost him a ball game. That game had live betting opportunity all over it. And even a betting note too on that instance where no one really got ahead of each other too much except for San Francisco in that San Francisco-Arizona game, except for in the 1 touchdown that got them up a whole 7 points once. Immediately, the Cardinals jumped to 6.5 on the spread live. So if they just rebuttal at all, you're going to cover in an overall pre-flop, of what Vegas had. Sometimes you can get fortunate and just understand that a game is very much a great tennis rally, if you want to go metaphor with it. And if you take that plus what Vegas has it, like another great example, the Chargers plus 5.5 at one point in that game when Denver was up 7, 20-13 and controlling pace, You got to sit there and go, all right, emotional purchase maybe because the Chargers are going to charge her, even though these Jimmy Kaki Harbaugh Chargers don't. The wherewithal to have the quick impulse to punch the +5.5 Chargers ticket before the Keenan Allen game tying score has you beat a number that Vegas never even got high enough in their pre-flop assessment because Denver was +2.5, +3 on the market all week. So sometimes you get fortunate where you're taking a live betting number. One example being those Cardinals in that 6.5 down 7 spot, and another being the Chargers down 7, getting 5.5. Both numbers bigger than what Vegas has on the full game. You eat. You eat in a nice way on a read and react just because of timing of your purchase on the live betting market, which through 3 weeks, my genuine takeaway is way more interesting than what we're seeing on the pre-flop. The pre-flop, it's back to my guy Krakenberger. It is so difficult to pinpoint because if you have Denver +2.5 instead of Denver +3, or you don't buy the juice by the half point if you really want expensive half point, but you ate, it makes you sick because Denver was covering in that game almost all the way to the freaking Tufonga, just a ridiculous personal foul play, and here we are. So it's just a fascinating takeaway on the live betting board as we also bounce around and remind you off a 2-2-1 against the spread day. I was 4-1 on predictions of who was going to win those games. Looking ahead to this week, I'm curious to see where the money comes in and where the numbers lie. I'll say fishy, really hard to even comprehend lines. So Minnesota on the road. This game's in Ireland, if I'm correct. Ireland, Pittsburgh versus Minnesota. Minnesota's getting 2.5 as the road team across the pond. And Pittsburgh's 2-1. And Minnesota, we've seen what they are. 2 weeks with McCarthy, 1 week with Wentz versus Jake Browning's Bengals. And you're telling me Kevin O'Connell and the boys with Wentz, 79 and Madden Carson is laying 2.5 against Rodgers, 2-1 Steelers. I'm telling you, it could be a massive trap across the pond. Steelers, I believe, have been outgained by 286 total yards per, I think it was Orlovsky that tweeted that I bookmarked through three weeks. We're fortunate we were on the Steelers -1.5 at New England. I thought I was the right side, but a lot of things went their way towards the end. It's just one of these things on the look ahead that could be even not so much traps, but hard to even understand, especially in this backup plural situation we have here where so many teams have backups, what that even says about the overall assessment of rosters. Like Minnesota laying 2.5. It's just an excellent Brian Flores defense. Their front seven is menacing. They know and have a lot of data too on Aaron Rodgers versus this Minnesota defense. He's not that far removed from the division, as we know. We also have the Tampa Bay Bucks hosting the Eagles, getting 3.5 as a home dog. And if you're just fortunate to be on Philly and cashing that ticket, no business cashing it against the Rams, you'd like to think maybe a little too much forgiveness to a line that you shouldn't feel good laying if you're on Philly on the road this week on -3.5's note. Now, worth mentioning the Packers blowing everybody's survivor pools, but also the Cleveland Browns at home. This is 2 in the first 3 weeks where they're getting at least 5 points at home. Cover versus the Bengals, almost won the game. Covered at the very end and stolen a true 3-phase W, a win against the Packers. This is betting in the NFL. Nobody should feel good about taking Cleveland week 1 +5.5 against the Bengals. You certainly shouldn't feel good about plugging the schnoz and taking them +7.5 at home against the undefeated Packers. But they cover, and they cover. It's just really interesting. Now, we got as far as learning lessons before we get out of here, because a lot of this is just kind of just a live betting takeaway and overall just venting of what I witnessed. I think this Houston Texans team, I don't want to say broken, but they're laying 7.5 at home at 0-3 against the Tennessee Titans this week. I simply don't know how you can even get behind getting to the window on that thought. It's almost incomprehensible if you're really getting down to what you watched against Jacksonville. Sure, Nico Collins fumbles a ball he shouldn't have, but they also shouldn't have even been in that situation if Trevor Lawrence didn't throw one of the worst balls I've seen all season, the prince that was not promised. So there are fishy lines again across the board for week 4. You got Seattle in a virtual pick 'em with Arizona in Arizona, where Kyler Murray's not that good with insurance at State Farm. If you go look at the splits, and we cashed or we hit the side on the money line, but we didn't hit the ticket on a bad beat hook of the Niners winning on a 1-point game, like a high AL Central throwback baseball score, 16-15. Ridiculous. So we're throwing out a little bit of the numbers here, because if you get the best of the numbers this week, it's going to be an interesting closing line thought on like a road divisional dog like Tennessee, not super glamorous. Where does the money come in on Philly -3.5? I'd like to think that number may come down to end up being Bucks +3, but key number being 3 of a couple other in the world of betting. We have some interesting numbers, especially across the pond with 2.5 in Pittsburgh, Minnesota. But to take a look here at power rankings and going through a couple of the undefeated teams, if you want to know how strong Vegas feels about the Indianapolis Colts, they're only getting 3.5 points. 3.5 points on the road against this Rams team. Really fishy line. Really, really fishy line. Also, if you wanted to jump on it early, um, Baltimore is -3 at Kansas City. I don't know how Kansas City comes back to base camp and beats a Baltimore Ravens team that has been looking to get rebuttals against them anytime they possibly can. Last but not least, on the fishy lines that really are kind of, is this even, how does this check? Is Here's a Chicago Bears team 1-2 at the Raiders on the road. Raiders couldn't look worse, and it's a virtual pick 'em right now. Is everybody going to walk into a Bears trap because the Bears were the right side at home, or they're going to get a riled up, of course, great effort off a over 50 lethargic outing against the Lions? But this is the psychology of betting the National Football League week to week. Buying teams off getting embarrassed, like the Raiders against Mariota, their old backup, by the way. You would expect season on the line for Pete Carroll's boys at home in a pick 'em in a spot where the Bears have an early bye the following week. I'm not saying the line doesn't make as little a sense as like the Steelers Vikings line. I just could maybe feel a Bears trap where this is a game where the Raiders find a way to get a great effort. Caleb, maybe, who's not notorious for turning the ball over, walks into a little bit of front seven Crosby pressure, and here we are. I also expect, if you want best efforts buttoned up, the Micah Parsons Bowl, Dallas at home against Micah on the road in Green Bay, coming to Jerry's World. Grab a ticket, grab your TO popcorn. This is going to be sensational. But Dallas is getting 6.5. Has to be the side, despite Green Bay blowing what they should not have in Cleveland. So Biggest takeaways has to be the live betting takeaways. Really read and react on teams that are quality and teams that aren't going to have fight. And you can kind of pick up on that off feel, but just early optics, couple of fishy lines, and teams that are desperate, like the Dallas Cowboys, may shock us yet again in the National Football League. Appreciate everybody watching. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. We will be back making best bets on our Moneyline Monaco Pot. Don't forget to hug your mothers.